What's going on, family? I'm Scrapbook Boxing, the Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuff series. I will continue my conversation with you concerning the complete history of boxing. On the evening of November 25th, 1938, Henry Armstrong would defeat 32-year-old Filipino welterweight Seferino Garcia, defeated him in 15 rounds in New York's Madison Square Garden. The referee was Arthur Donovan, and he would raise the hand of Henry Armstrong. And Armstrong would be once again announced as the welterweight champion of the world. Henry Armstrong would be the first black American featherweight champion in boxing history. He would be the second black fighter to win a title at the prestigious Madison Square Garden. He was the second black lightweight champion, the fourth black welterweight champion. But he would hold those titles simultaneously. He was a legend and he was an icon, the great Henry Armstrong. Seferino Garcia had a record of 103 wins, 24 losses, 12 draws, and 62 knockouts. He would face Otto Blackwell of Portland, Oregon, Frankie Blair in Camden, New Jersey, and Jackie Berkey of Oregon, Utah. On the undercard would be Holman Williams, who was a black murderous row middleweight, and Albert Chalky Wright, who would defeat Joey Archibald to become the featherweight champion of the world. Now, Chalky Wright would be the protege, along with Henry Armstrong and Barney Ross, of Eddie Mead, who would be their managers. December 5th of 1938, Henry Armstrong would once again defend his title, this time against Al Manfredo. He knocked him out in 3 rounds in Cleveland Arena. The referee was Tony LeBlanc, and he was stepping because Manfredo was obviously unable to defend himself. Alfred Manfredo was born August 22nd, 1912 in California. He died January 16th, 1990 in California. He was 77 years of age at the time of his death, stood 5 foot 6 inches, weighed 133 to 145 pounds. Fought from 1930 to 1940, had a record of 105 total bouts, 74 wins, 27 knockouts, and 23 losses. On the undercard of that fight would be Solly Krieger, Petey Cerrone, and Lou Ambers. All these men were world champions. January 1st, 1939, Henry Armstrong would defeat arch-rival 25-year-old featherweight Alberto Baby Arizmendi. Fought him at the Olympic Auditorium in Los Angeles, California. The bout would go 10 rounds. The referee, George Blake, would stop the contest, awarding Henry Armstrong the decision. Baby Arizmendi was 29 years old. He had a record of 84 wins, 16 losses, 14 draws, and 17 knockouts. As for Henry Armstrong, he was 25 years old. He had a record of 93 wins, 12 losses, 7 draws, and 61 knockouts. Let's talk about George Blake for one more moment and we'll move on. George Blake was a referee, as we know, of the Henry Armstrong and Seferino bout in 1940. The contest took place in California. It was for the National Boxing Association, because the New York SAC wouldn't recognize that title match because it was to be pronounced as 10 rounds. They only saw 15 rounds as a national championship title bout, and they wouldn't respect that, so they had to go to California. That was deliberate because they wanted to pull a fast one on Henry Armstrong, which they did. George Blake was planted by the mob to do just that. He would take away 5 rounds from Henry Armstrong, and he would make the fight a draw. He took 5 rounds from Armstrong because he alleged the low blows that Armstrong would throw against Seferino Garcia. My opinion, this was set up so that Seferino Garcia would take on Ken Overland. And every time I think about that, it's always unjustly unfortunate as to how things could be set up on a fighter, because Henry Armstrong lost a golden opportunity to become the 4-time world champion. He would have been the first man to do so. But he was robbed of that opportunity. And George Blake was the referee that evening. On a Wednesday night, January 25th, 1939, World Heavyweight Champion Brown Bomber Joe Louis would stop former 3-year reign light heavyweight champion John Henry Lewis. He stopped him in the first round at the New York's Madison Square Garden. The referee was Arthur Donovan. He would stop the contest 2 minutes and 29 seconds in front of 17,350 spectators. This was iconic because it would have been the second time two black fighters would fight for the World Heavyweight Championship title. The first time happened in 1913. And that was Jack Johnson. Jack Johnson would give battling Jim Johnson that opportunity. But this happened in front of $102,015.43. That was what was generated by the crowd that evening. Sad moment, because John Henry Lewis was a gallant champion. But what they would do to John Henry Lewis was so unjust, so unfortunate. It's another page in the unjust of fighters, black fighters particularly, in the history of boxing. This money would pay for the medical expenses and retirement benefits for John Henry Lewis. John Henry Lewis was knocked down 3 times. What would happen with John Henry Lewis? His license would be revoked, and this is the tragic part of his story. He had to see an eye physician to clear him for his upcoming bout with Tiger Jack Fox. And he did not pass his eye examination. So the physician would contact the Boxing Association. And he would refer that John Henry Lewis not fight and defend his title against Tiger Jack Fox. Since that did not happen, John Henry Lewis was stripped of one of his titles, and Tiger Jack Fox would now take on Milo Patina for the vacant strap. Milo Patina would defeat Tiger Jack Fox, and he would now become one half of the World Light Heavyweight Champion. He was a southpaw. And he would get an opportunity to now take on the second half of the Light Heavyweight Championship strap. John Henry Lewis would take on Al Gaynor, Connecticut. He would defeat Al Gaynor. That would be his last Light Heavyweight Championship title defense. He would then be stripped from that title. That title would now become vacant. Billy Conn would take on Fred Apostoli. He would defeat Fred Apostoli, and he would become the second half of the World Light Heavyweight Champion. He would then unify that title with Milo Patina. He would defeat Milo Patina, and then he would now become worldwide unified recognition of the Light Heavyweight Championship title. Because of that, he would get his shot in 1941 against the Brown Bomber, Joe Louis. We'll get to that when we speak about that time. Joe Louis was 24 years old. He stood 6 foot 1.5 inches, weighed 225 pounds, and had a 76-inch reach. He was a betting odds of 8-1, had a record of 36 wins, 1 loss, and 30 knockouts. As for John Henry Lewis, who was 24 years old, he stood 5 foot 11 inches, weighed 180 pounds, had a 75.5-inch reach, and had a record of 100 wins, 10 losses, 5 draws, and 56 knockouts. John Henry Lewis became the light heavyweight champion in 1935 when he would take on Bob Olin. Bob Olin worked in the stock market exchange on Wall Street. And in 1929, when the stock market would crash, John Henry Lewis, along with many others, would take it kind of hard. But Bob Olin would have to look for a new line of work. And he would get into boxing. He would become champion. And that's how John Henry Lewis would become champion. The first black American light heavyweight champion in boxing history. Oh, what a moment. What a moment. Just to finish up on John Henry Lewis, because I got to give him more credit for what he has done. He was a remarkable light heavyweight champion, very underrated. John Henry Lewis would open up apartments in Harlem. He would spend his money well. You could find John Henry Lewis in Grubb's Gym on 116th Street, along with George Godfrey, the Leaperville Shadow, Harry Wills, the Brown Panther, of course, the Ray Robinson, Smitty. He was at that time the lightweight, or the featherweight Golden Glove champion, because he was about to fight Louis Spider Valentine. you could find so mmany great fighters at Grubb's Gym. And John Henry Lewis, to me, would always be recognized as the first Black American light heavyweight champion in boxing history. He would be champion in 1938. Joe Louis, the Brown Bomber, would be champion as a heavyweight in 1938. Henry Armstrong, a black featherweight, black welterweight, and black lightweight champion. Black fighters at that time had it sewed up. And what made it more binding was Charlie Burley would take the colored welterweight championship title from Coco Kid, and he would become a black welterweight colored champion. What a moment. On a Friday night, February 3rd, 1939, light heavyweight Milo Patino would stop Tiger Jack Fox to win the vacant light heavyweight crown, New York Sack, 9-round technical knockout. Patino was 22 years old and Fox was 31 years old. Tiger Jack Fox was born April 2nd, 1907 in Washington. He would die April 6, 1952 in Washington, fought from 1928 to 1950. Had a total bout career of 178 matches, 138 wins, 91 knockouts. He would take on Bobby Zanander and Tiger Tit Laurie, Deacon Leo Kelly, just to name a few. He would face fighters such as Milo Patino, and he would come up short. Milo Patino's name was Emilio Patino. He was born November 18, 1916 in Bridgeport, Connecticut. He died December 20th, 1996 in Beacon, New York. I met Milo Patino. I met Henry Armstrong. I met Chalky Wright. So many. 1934 was some year. It was a year of Barney Ross and Jim McLaughlin, and Joe Louis began his professional debut. Quite some year was 1934. Tiger Jack Fox was 31 years old. He stood 5'11.5 inches, had a 75-inch reach, had a record of 98 wins, 15 losses, 10 draws, and 66 knockouts. As for Milo Patino, he was 22 years old. He stood 5'9 inches. He was a southpaw, light heavyweight, had a 70-inch reach, had a record of 43 wins, 6 losses, 2 draws, and 19 knockouts. February 10th, 1939, Billy Conn would defeat Fred Apostoli, 15 rounds, New York's Madison Square Garden, for the vacant NBA New York Sack Light Heavyweight Championship. Frank Fulmer was the referee, and he would realize that Billy Conn had outclassed Fred Apostoli. Now, don't let nobody kid you. Fred Apostoli was a middleweight champion. He was an outstanding amateur, phenomenal amateur. He would fight in college and win all the tournaments that the college collegiate events would have. Billy Conn's name was William David Conn. He was known as the Pittsburgh Kid. He was born October 8, 1917 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He would die May 29, 1993. He was 75 years of age at the time of his death, and he would reside in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He fought from 1934 to 1948, had a record of 76 wins, 76 total bouts, 64 wins, 11 losses, and he was stopped 3 times with 15 knockouts. July 13, 1939, Conn would defeat Milo Patino for the vacant NBA and New York Sack Light Heavyweight Championship title. June 18, 1941, Conn would get knocked out by Joe Louis in 12 rounds. 2 minutes and 58 seconds. Now, I'm not sure if it was 13 rounds. I believe it was 13 rounds. The radio call was by Don Dunphy. That was his first radio call. Conn was 21 years old. He stood 6 foot 1.5 inches. Had a 72.25 inch reach at light heavyweight. Had a record of 44 wins, 9 losses, 1 draw, and 7 knockouts. Fred Apostoli was 26 years old. He stood 5 foot 9.5 inches, had a 70-inch reach, and had a record of 34 wins, 4 losses, and 18 knockouts. Yes, I'm positive it was 13 rounds when Billy Conn was knocked out by Joe Louis. I know Louis was knocked out in 12 rounds with Max Smelling in Yankee Stadium, but I'm sure it was 13 rounds with Billy Conn. March 4th, 1939, the world welterweight champion, Henry Armstrong, would knock out Bobby Pancho in 4 rounds in Havana, Cuba. He would remain world welterweight champion. The contest took place at the Tropicana Stadium. It was the Tropicana Stadium in Havana, Cuba. The referee was James J. Broderick. It was stopped about 1 minute and 10 seconds of the 4th round. Now, Bobby Poncho was 28 years old. He was 5'6", welterweight with a 66-inch reach. He had a record of 90 wins, 47 losses, and 15 draws with 45 knockouts. Henry Armstrong was 29 years old. He stood 5'5.5", had a 67-inch reach, a record of 94 wins, 12 losses, 7 draws, and 61 knockouts. Let me slow down. March 16th, 1939, Henry Armstrong would defend his World Welterweight Championship title, once again against Lou Feldman, first-round knockout in St. Louis, Missouri. He would remain welterweight champion of the world. The contest took place at the Municipal Auditorium. Lou Feldman would take his title against Kid Chocolate. Kid Chocolate was one of the greatest, although Cuban, black featherweights of all time. He was born November 5th, 1908 in Brooklyn, New York, died May 11th, 1983. He was 74 years of age at the time of his death, and he would reside in Brooklyn, New York. I met Lou Feldman, I met Kid Chocolate. He fought from 1927 to 1941, had a total bout career of 189 bouts, 116 wins, 55 losses, and 10 knockouts. 29-year-old Henry Armstrong stood 5'5.5", had a 67-inch reach, had a record of 95 wins, 12 losses, 7 draws, and 62 knockouts. 30-year-old Lou Feldman stood 5'5", had a record of 104 wins, 45 losses, 16 draws, and 16 knockouts. I'm Scrapbook Boxing. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for listening. Be well. Peace. Let's talk about 2 more bouts of Henry Armstrong, and then we'll complete this narration here. March 31st, 1939, Henry Armstrong would knock out Davey Day in 12 rounds in New York's Madison Square Garden. He would remain world welterweight champion. Davey Day comes to New York, Madison Square Garden, to face 56 wins, 5 losses, 4 draws, and 27 knockouts. He wanted to face Henry Armstrong. He wanted an opportunity, and he got one. Davey Day's name was Dave Datchett. He was born August 12, 1912 in Chicago, Illinois. He would die October 2nd, 1990 in Chicago. I had the pleasure of meeting Davey Day. He stood 5'9", lightweight, and fought from 1931 to 1941. Had a total bout career of 74 bouts, 61 wins, and 26 knockouts. April 1st, 1939, I should say, Cisco Escobar defeats K.O. Moran, 15 rounds, San Juan, Puerto Rico. He would remain as bantamweight champion. April 17th of 1939, World Heavyweight Champion Joe Louis knocks out Jack Roper, 1 round, Los Angeles, California. He would defend his crown. And that was a pretty simple fight for Joe Louis. And he would knock this man out, and he said he zagged when he should have zagged. April 18th, 1939, Joey Archibald would defeat Leo Roddick in 15 rounds in Providence, Rhode Island. He would win the vacant featherweight championship strap. Joey Archibald would lose his title to Chalky Wright, and then Chalky Wright would lose his title to Willie Pep. Now, Henry Armstrong would take on a fighter Thursday, May 25th, 1939. It would be at the Hemingway Arena. Be against Ernie Rudrick, 15 rounds in London. He would remain welterweight champion of the world. Armstrong was 29 years old. He stood 5'5", weighed 135 pounds, and had a 67-inch reach. Had a record of 97 wins, 12 losses, and 64 knockouts. Ernie Rudrick was 25 years old. He stood 5'8", weighed 146 pounds, and had a 72-inch reach. Had a record of 78 total bouts, 12 losses, and 32 knockouts. Ernie Rudrick was born January 25th, 1914 in England, and he died January 1st, 1986 in Liverpool, England. He was 71 years of age at the time of his arrest, and fought from 1931 to 1950. Had a total bout career of 140 bouts, 112 wins, 45 knockouts, 24 losses, and he was stopped twice. Thursday, July 13th, 1939, Billy Conn would defeat Milo Patina for the second time, 15 rounds in New York's Madison Square Garden. I'm going to end this video for sure. I just want to remind you, when I have a conversation with you, I'm just laying back here and I'm speaking at the top of the head and I'm having a great time. This is what I used to do with my dad. We would just sit on the couch, or we would drive and go to the gym or wherever we went, and we would just have conversations with one another like like I'm having with you. And we would say it in poetic form, or as we were reading a book, we would just speak and talk about matches that we know of, But what I'm doing with you here is speaking in chronicle order, year by year, fight by fight. And that's not an easy thing to do because I have to remember what fight happened after when, what was the date, what happened, who was the referee, as I'm speaking to you. And I'm freestyling, speaking from the top of the dome, as they say. So, hope you enjoyed that. Listen out for the next video. Once again, I'm Scrapbook Boxing, Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuff series, stating all great fights and all great fighters will never be forgotten on my channel. Thanks for listening. We're going to continue with this episode, The Complete History of Boxing. Be well, and see you next time. Peace.